everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grinwald, and I am super excited to start this new season with you. Truly incredible changemaker guests from around the world will be sharing their stories again right here. On this week's episode, my guest is Mark Levy, differentiation expert, speaker, author, and magician. The ideas Mark and his clients have created have been discussed and used by millions of people all over the world. Mark's clients include Simon Sinek of Start With Why fame, former head of the strategy unit of the Harvard Business School, and the list just truly goes on and on. During this episode, Mark shares about being a bit on the shy side as a child, his love for magic starting at a young age, working in bookstores and then working with bookstores, to eventually helping people share their backstories both personally and professionally in a way that truly sets them apart. Many of his clients have gone on to write best-selling books, launch large-scale organizations, and are speaking all over the world. Mark himself is a keynote speaker, has written for the New York Times, and co-created the show Chamber Magic, which has run in New York City for 21 years and is ranked by TripAdvisor as the city's #1 live show. Listen in to hear Mark talk about going for the freak out and the wait until you see what comes next theory. You can learn more about Mark and how he helps people create their next big idea by going to levyinnovation.com. On March 24th, Today is the Day is launching the inaugural International Changemakers Forum called Challenge Yourself, Disrupt the Status Quo. CNN heroes, TEDx speakers, authors, a former FBI agent, executive producer and writer of the TV show NCIS, CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, and more will be sharing their expertise on 6 topics that matter. Thank you to Investors Bank for being the Catalyst for Change sponsor, and to the NJBIA for being a scholarship sponsor of this event. Sponsorships are available and can help you and your organization share your mission and information with both a local and broader audience. To purchase tickets and to learn more, go to todayisthedayliveit.com. That's todayisthedayliveit.com. Also, don't forget, subscribe to the Today's the Day Changemakers YouTube channel, comment, like, and share, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. The views expressed by all Today's the Day Changemakers podcast guests are their own. Their appearance on the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast does not imply any endorsement of them or any entity that they represent. Have a great week, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grinwald, and as I say every single week, I have the honor and opportunity to interview the most incredible human beings that walk the earth. And today I have Mark Levy with me. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hey, Jody. Thank you for putting me in that neighborhood. I don't know if I belong, but I appreciate the kindness in putting me there. Thank you.
Absolutely, because I only interviewed change makers, right? So that's the thing. And you know, the way I've always seen it is, if I'm interviewing someone and one person, it helps one person, we've done our job. So of course,
Right.
if it helps multiple people, we have over exceeded the expectation, and that's always
Right.
the goal. So yeah,
Cool.
so I'm gonna read a little bit about your bio because it's an incredible bio, and this is the only time I read during the podcast, which is so important to get this right. Mark Levy is a differentiation expert. The ideas Mark and his clients have created have been discussed and used by hundreds of millions of people worldwide. Mark's clients include Simon Sinek of Start With Why fame, the former head of the strategy unit of the Harvard Business School, and the founder of the famed cult TV Mystery Science Theater 3000. Mark is also a magician. I can't wait to talk about that too. A show he co-created, Chamber Magic, has run in New York City for 21 years and is ranked by TripAdvisor as the city's #1 live, rated higher than even the musical Hamilton. That's incredible. That's incredible. Mark has written for the New York Times, and one of his books, Accidental Genius, Using Writing to Generate Your Best Ideas, Insight, and Content, has been translated into 11 languages. He can be reached at levyinnovation.com. Did I say that right? Levy Innovation.
You did, Levy. Exactly. Beautifully put. Thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. Well, Mark, welcome so much. I mean, where to start, right? There's a lot there.
Right. I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right, awesome. And you know, and I know that you have probably answered so many of the same questions that I'm probably going to ask, but we're going to try to dig even deeper if we can get there.
Sure.
But what I want to find out from you, because I always like to go backwards, right? We didn't start here. We had a past. So where were you brought up? What kind of child were you?
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for asking. So I was born in 1962 in Flushing, Queens, right? Part of New York City. And so I was a very, uh, I think of myself at least as being a very obedient child. You know, I mean, I was not a difficult child. I was a very obedient, I was a very quiet child. I was a very to myself kind of, I mean, I had friends, but I was to myself. And so I think that one of the reasons, if you think about what my job is as a differentiation expert, right? I help organizations and brands and thought leaders stand out around a big, sexy idea. Like the idea, like my whole job is to call attention to people and ideas. And so I think that that came from my upbringing of being very quiet and wanting to be in the background and hating to be in the spotlight. I was very, I was very shy. So you often tend to like want to study about like a weakness. I wanted to be a magician growing up. And so I knew to be a magician, to do my magic tricks, I needed to have people pay attention to me. But I hated to have people pay attention to me and I didn't know how to. So I kind of had to learn a lot about how to do that if I wanted to use my magic, if that makes sense. So that's really why I kind of became expert at it, because I wouldn't be able to do magic if I had no one in the audience.
Right. So how do you do that? Right. Because I was an introvert growing up. I would have never thought in a million years I'd be talking to people, like this or on a podcast. I wanted to hide under the desk if the teacher called on me, right? That was like the worst thing they could ever do is find me in the classroom. So
Right.
how do you stay the introvert yet get people to pay attention to you and become the expert at something all at the same
Oh,
time?
yeah. Great question. I can see why you're so good at your work. I'll answer it. There's a bunch of different answers that I could give for that. But I find that so I know for me and with a lot of people I've worked with, a lot of organizations, that if you try to look at something from a perfectionistic standpoint, like I need to stand out and I can't have anyone dislike me and I need to stand out perfectly and I need to stand out now and forever, but like for all the right reasons or so. That's really, that's perfectionistic. And so that's why it's difficult for us to stand out because we're using a design parameter that just is not it just doesn't work. And one of the ways I got over perfectionism, so 15, 20, I forget how long, I'm bad now with the remembering dates, but at least 15 years ago, I took a stand-up comedy course in New York City. So it was about 2 weeks long. And by the way, what I'm saying is related to everyone out there, whether you run a Fortune 100 company or anything, this idea is apropos. So I was taking a comedy course. So we had about 2 weeks in order to write jokes and deliver our stuff to about 20 people in the class. We had 2 or 3 sessions a week. And then the final was doing a 5-minute set in a New York City comedy club on a Saturday night. Like that was you went from never having written a joke to 2.5 weeks later being in front of a crowd on a Saturday night. So I chose Caroline's on Broadway, right where Seinfeld and all those guys played. So I was the 9th of 15 comics. But before I did that, a day or two before, I had written my set, I knew my set, but I had a meeting with the teacher, this guy Stephen Rosenfeld, and I said, I'm petrified to do this. Like I don't know. And he said, why are you petrified? And I said, I'm scared I'm going to forget a joke, or maybe I'll start speaking and nothing will come out of my mouth. Like I'm petrified of this. And so he had said to me, so you think you have to do it perfectly, right? And I said, yeah, I didn't look at it in those terms, but I guess I do. And he said, wanting to speak in a way that's effective and wanting to do it perfectly are two different things. They have nothing to do with one another. He said, I've seen people stand up to give talks and they've done a perfect job, like they remembered everything, they delivered every line the way they intended. And I've seen them not make a dent in people's lives, like that they were forgotten instantly. He said, I have also seen people get up to speak, and I've seen them break down in tears, like shake from nerves, forget jokes. They had to pull their set out of their pocket on a piece of paper and read from it. Like I've seen them do that, and I've seen them kill. Like I've seen them do unbelievable, and the audience loved them. So he didn't put it this way, but this is the way I think of it, that you can't have perfection as a design parameter in what you're doing, because you're dead right away. And so often we have perfection as a design parameter, even if we haven't thought about it this way. So by the way, oh, the thing I didn't say to you, what he did say to me, this was the thing that was so meaningful, right? Because he was a comedian. He said, wanting to do your set perfectly would be like me saying, right, we're in New York City. He said, it would be like me saying, this weekend, I want to drive to Cape Cod, but I want to drive to Cape Cod without making a left-hand turn. And he said, like, what's that have to do with getting to Cape Cod? You know, driving to Cape Cod, that's the result you're looking for. If you want to make if you don't want to make a left turn, that's some crazy design parameter that you're applying that has nothing to do with the situation. It shouldn't matter how many left-hand turns you make in order to get to Cape Cod, as long as you end up in Cape Cod. So like to me, in working with people, again, the largest, I worked with people who have 400,000 employees. You know, like the largest people, I often find it's like, what is it? Like, what's Cape Cod? What are we trying to do? And don't worry about the number of left-hand turns we need to make to get there. Like, as long as we end up in Cape Cod. So forgive me for going on and on about this, but I just see this as an essential thing that stands in the way, like brands, organizations, people, they want to do things perfectly, and they want to do it perfectly right away. And that just, it's unnecessary. It puts unnecessary strain on you.
It totally does. Because the thing about perfection that I've found in interviewing so many people too is that it's subjective.
Right.
So whose perfection is it? Because who has the scale, right? Who owns
Right.
the scale? We haven't found the top person that owns the scale of what perfection is. And when did, and who said perfection had to be the goal? Where did that actually ever come from?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's very subjective, and it just doesn't have, like, the stuff that you love in the world, none of it was created through perfectionism. Like, it just wasn't your favorite book, your favorite show, your favorite company. They did not do it perfectly.
No, they had fallen a couple of times before it actually probably came to light the way it was supposed to.
Right.
The other thing that I really loved what you said, which I think is so important, the message, was about how people would be, breaking out their set and still kill it in the audience. And the reason I want to highlight that is because of the fact that the human side, when we can just showcase the human side of who we are, that's the connection with other people, right? So people can identify with a time that they might have flubbed words or felt nervous, or maybe they don't like public speaking. So they're going to cheer that person on to engage them.
Right. Oh, absolutely. So I used to be you mentioned public speaking. I used to be fearful of speaking, and now I'm a closing keynote guy, like in major places, thousands of people. And that all came from the fact, I think what I had said before is, like, not only do you not have to be perfect, but you can be flawed and still kill. Like, it's not about being flawed and being mediocre. Like, you can dominate. Like, you can have people in stitches, you can have people in amazement, whatever it is you're trying to do, along with those flaws. Like, it's almost as if those flaws are a method to get to that amazement. Like, you don't have to look at it like, oh, now I have to accept second best because I made a mistake. No, like, that's part of the process to get you to that amazement. Right. I'm just playing off what it is you said, but that when I speak now, I'll sometimes have to speak in front of thousands of people. This is exactly what I say to myself before I go out. I say to myself, you're going to go out there full power, full strength, and you are going to kill. And what's more, you don't have to be perfect to do it. And then I walk out, and I even say that as I'm walking out. It's like, go in full power, full strength, you're going to kill, and you don't even have to be perfect. And so like instantly, so it's be fully who I am, and who you are is not a perfect guy. And that's okay. You're still going to like hit a grand slam. That's okay.
It's almost like permission, right? It's almost like giving ourselves permission to just be and go out and give and do 150%, whatever that is for you. But that also, I want to talk about how that also plays us into being differentiators, right? Because your entire thing is really about the next big sexy idea and helping people create that to be a differentiator. But how does not being perfect, giving yourself permission, and throw in being a differentiator come together, do you think? Because I think it all does play a role.
Yeah. Well, I have my answer, because you said, I think it all plays a role. What is it you're thinking? How do they come together?
I was thinking, because sometimes our flawed pieces of who we are, actually differentiate us enough that people can connect.
Right. That if you're too perfect, then people can't identify with you. So a big part of what it is I do with people is I help them come up with their backstory, both their personal backstory about why they were born to do what it is they do, or why what it is they do is a cause in their life. It means more to them than just as a means of making money. So that backstory can be used to help you stand out, or it can be used as a leadership tool. But I also help people create the backstory and the brand story for organizations, sometimes billion-dollar organizations. So it's the same kind of idea. And I find that I say your backstory may come from a strength, or it may, there's a lot of places with which to identify the story about why you do what it is you do. But it's most likely about you trying to overcome some deficit, or you or your brand trying to solve a problem in the world that has come to mean so much to you that it's just the driving force in what you do, right? So it's rare that your backstory is, I'm great at this, look how great I am, I won this thing or so. And it's like, it's just because what your backstory is, it's just emblematic of why you're doing the work you're doing, right? If that makes, to give you an example of a backstory, if I can, just to illustrate this point. So, a long time ago, like 18 years ago or so, or how, again, I'm bad with dates. So a man called me named Bill Treasurer. And Bill said, Mark, I'm a management consultant. I do leadership development and team building workshops. Unfortunately, 300,000 other consultants do exactly what it is I do. So when I go into an organization trying to win the organization's business, I always go in hat in hand, kind of hanging my head, because I have no real way of standing out from the other 300,000 consultants. And even when I win the organization's business, and I occasionally win their business, they always get me way, way down on price, because I had no way of holding up to any value I had established in their eyes. He said, a top week for me, a week I absolutely pray for, is $1,800. And this was years ago, like 18 years ago. He said, I have a wife, I have kids, I can't keep going on this way, I need your help. So Bill hired me. I interviewed Bill, I interviewed his clients, I interviewed his colleagues, and I discovered something interesting. Bill Treasurer, before he was a management consultant, was a professional high diver in theme parks. He would climb up a 9-story high radio tower. That's a ladder standing all by itself with nothing around it, 9 stories high. When he got to the top of this 9-story high ladder, imagine being 9 stories up with nothing around you. When he got to the top of the 9-story high ladder, he would spray his body with gasoline, he would light himself on fire, and he would dive 9 stories into water. Over the course of 10 years, he did that gig 1,500 times. He was so good at being Captain Inferno that the theme park he worked for named him the captain of an entire team of Captain Infernos that went up and down the East Coast of the United States performing this gig. But Jody, the most interesting thing about this story was Bill was and still is afraid of
heights.
Right. So we took the idea that Bill did what he had to do despite his fear. And we married it to the fact he did leadership consulting and team building workshops. And we made his company Giant Leap Consulting. They build courage in organizations. They help leaders and their employees take the risks they know they should be taking, but aren't. So all of Bill's keynotes, all of his coaching, all of his consulting, all of his everything he did started to revolve around ways of driving fear out of the workplace, to quote W. Edwards Deming, so that people could and companies could achieve their top goals, right? So this idea, we didn't just use Bill's backstory as a way of substantiating or amplifying what he was already doing. We actually used his backstory in that instance to change what his entire business was about. Because he was a management consultant, like that's what he did or whatnot. But now he was a courage builder. And this is 18 years ago. At the time, it was unfriggin' heard of. There was no one doing this work. And we changed his whole business around what his backstory was pointing to. And for many years now, he's a 7-figure a year guy. He's booked months in advance. He writes books about leadership and courage, like Courage Goes to Work and Real Leaders Open Doors, things like that, all around leadership and courage. So that would be an example. And it's the same kind of thing, by the way. I work with people in medium-sized companies, small companies, large companies. It's what's your personal backstory? Why is this work important to you? And let's understand what all the other leaders in the company, like what their backstory is, because it just creates this kinship. It creates this closeness. It reminds me of the flaw thing that you talked about. And also, it reminds me also, you know, in the Middle East, I forget where, but they make these beautiful rugs, right? They make these beautiful rugs, and they make sure they can make the rug perfectly. They're handmade, right. And they make the rugs perfectly, in other words, without any mistakes. But they often knit in a mistake into the rug on purpose, because they felt that if they knitted a perfect rug, they're like challenging God. They're like trying to put themselves on the level of God, and they don't want to do that. So they knit in a mistake to show that they're far below or whatnot. And so it creates, you know what I mean? So yeah. the rug is this emblem of not only their genius, but their understanding of philosophy of life, of where they're, and I find our backstories are often like that, right? You don't want to come, the Bill Treasurer story is such a great story because he was and still is afraid of heights. Like, who better to teach you how to build courage than someone who does over and over again because he needs to support his family, like something he's scared of.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like it reminds me, you know, like if you go to a gym and you get a trainer, and let's say you want to lose weight, and I could be wrong on this, so like I don't say this with certainty, but like you probably want a trainer who's lost weight. You probably don't want someone who's always been skinny and, you know, like it's because like they don't know, like they don't get it. You know, like they couldn't, it's not possible. You know, like how could you know about something you've never been?
So that's interesting that you just said that, because I take that back to where we first started, which was you didn't want to be seen, you didn't want to be heard.
Right.
But you wanted to be a magician, you want to be in front of people, you're trying to figure out how to do that. Now you're helping other people become differentiators. So then how did you launch yourself so that people could find you, right? Because you were the quieter person and trying to figure out how to stand out. I feel like that's like a perfect segue to that.
Oh yeah. Well, so again, bunch of ways to answer that question. I don't like, I think people have lots of different motivations. They often point to one motivation as the main motivation. And I think that might just be a story we tell ourselves, that life is more complex and ambiguous than we realize. And so things don't necessarily match up so perfectly. But what comes to mind on what you're saying is I really started to come out of my shell when, after I graduated college, I started to work in bookstores. I started to work in B. Dalton's in Flushing, Queens. And then I worked at the B. Dalton's in Greenwich Village on 8th Street and 6th Avenue that became a Barnes and Noble, the giant one. And I ran the information desk there. And so I had to start, I was really book smart. Like, I knew a lot about books and I loved books. And so in both those stores, even though I shelved books, like I did grunt work stuff, but I also was at the information desk, and even in Greenwich Village ran the information desk. And so I had to, like, people would just walk up to me and ask me questions, strangers, and I had to know the answers and know all about the books. And I think that I just became more outgoing. And one of the reasons was I was talking about the book and not about myself. And so after I left those places, I actually went to work for book distributors and book wholesalers, and I helped sell over $1 billion worth of books. Like I was killer at this stuff. We'd buy millions of dollars worth of books from publishers like Simon and Schuster and Random House, and then we'd sell them to independent bookstores and chain bookstores and whatnot. I sold $1 billion worth of books. And over the course of 14 years or however long it was that I did that job, I totaled it up. I did over 25,000 different pitches for books. And so it was never about selling Mark Levy. It was always about selling something I loved, which were these different books that I thought that people needed. So when I then left that job in 2001 to open up my own differentiation business, it was really looking at your job or looking at your life, whether it was a solo practitioner or whether it was someone, I've worked with major brands, major places. So it was whether I was looking at one person or like an enormous, I would look at what they had done as a book. I would say, here's the book, quote unquote, right? Here's the book Jody has written so far, like, right, with your business. Here's what the main idea is. Here are the ancillary ideas. Here are the stories she's telling. Here's the lesson she's deriving from those stories and so forth. I wonder if we took a quote unquote lesser idea of hers and moved it to the fore, or we put together two ideas that she hadn't put together before, or we took a lesson from one of the stories, a lesson that she hadn't drawn before, but which is apparent from the story, and we moved that to the fore of her business or her book. Like, we made the quote unquote book about that idea instead of what she was using. I wonder if it would be a better selling book then. And so that's what I do even today. Like, that's what I'm going to do. People from your audience, a few of them will likely hire me, I'm going to guess. I get a lot of people coming. So they're going to hire, and I'm going to, whether I say it or not to them, in my mind, I think of it as what they're going to tell me is about. It's like, okay, what have you written so far? Again, right? Even though their business has nothing to do with books, I interpret it that way. All right, what's the book? Okay, what's the main idea of the book? Okay, that's boring. Okay, let me ask you other questions about the product, the services, right? Okay, interesting. That thing you just said, that's super cool. Okay, what would your business be like if that super cool thing was at the top? How would it change the products, services, your marketplace, and what you're charging and so forth? Right, that's how I work.
So I know a lot of people, entrepreneurs, and I have a lot of entrepreneurs too who listen to the podcast, or those who want to become entrepreneurs. They are like, how are people going to find me? How are people going to, be directed towards me? So when you started and you launched your new business, going from being on the book side to now being a differentiation expert, how did you get it out there that, hey, this is what I'm doing now? I'm no longer doing this other thing. What was it? How did you switch?
Oh, okay. Um, I, I, well, so I left my business in the book distributor or book wholesaler because I got a gig. Because I'm a magician, there was another magician, a very prominent magician, who wanted to write a book. So he hired me to write a book with him. And the gig was for enough money that I was able to leave. But actually, because I've never answered, you asked wonderful questions, so I've never answered it. So that's true what I just said, but what I really wanted to say was right before that, I had called up, I wanted to start, I hadn't done magic in a while. And so there was a famous magician who I wanted to buy a trick of his to perform. So I actually called him. He didn't know me. That was key. I knew who he was, very famous. I called him and I told him what it was I was trying to do. Like I wanted to like just do some stuff while I was speaking, blah, blah, blah. And like while I was doing business talks and things like that. And so he gave me some counsel and we ended up hanging up. And I really hadn't told him much about myself, right? The next day I got an email from him and he said, his email was like, oh my God, you didn't tell me who you were. Now, I had not worked with, but I had this background in the book wholesale. I sold $1 billion worth of books. I was nominated for these awards and so forth. So I had done stuff. I just haven't done stuff to the degree I've done now. He said, you hadn't told me who you were. I have something I want to talk to you about. And he's the one who hooked me up with the guy who I then wrote a book with or so. And so where I'm going with this, forgive me for talking about it in a jumbled way, but I don't know that I've ever told this story in my life. The reason you would ask me, I realized right then and there, it's like, oh man, he didn't know who I was because I was trying to be humble. And so I didn't want to talk about who I am and what it is I do. And so he, by happenstance, because he Googled me, found out who I was like after the fact. And then he called me back and said, oh my God, I didn't realize, like, you've accomplished a lot. I have something right, like, like in that type of thing you do that I think you could help with. And that allowed me to quit my whole job and start a whole new industry. And that idea of like the fact of, gee, you kind of need to let people know who you are, even if you're not comfortable doing it, right? That's what I'm trying to get at here. I didn't want to do it. I didn't let him know. He went the extra mile to find out who I am. I didn't let him know. It's not like I did something, I fumbled the ball, like that's bad on me. He went the extra mile and he helped start my career because of that. This guy's named Larry Becker. So like Larry helped, me start my career because he went the extra mile to find out who I am. So I would say to people, who was it? Steve Jobs, where he said artists ship, or he said something like that. In other words, you can create a beautiful work of art, but until you let it out there, until you ship, it's not really a work of art, or it's not a fully realized work of art.
Right.
So that's how I kind of, to this day, I don't necessarily like to market or so, but I still get up in front of thousands of people to speak, because I got to ship. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing to people out there who I'm working with. It's like, what is it that you like to do in order to get out there? How can we use that? But sometimes you also have to do things you don't like to do.
Right.
I don't mean in immoral ways or whatnot, but you might, it's my like, well, I don't really like to do X, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, you know what? X works. So you kind of need to do X.
Right.
You know?
Right. I want to go back for a second what you said, because I think that there's something that in our society happens, that there's a difference between our ego, using our ego to be put out there, and being boastful and just sharing, right? And
Right.
in order to connect with others who might see that what you have is something they need or want. And
Right.
so and I think that for some people, they go to the side of, I don't want to say too much about myself because then I'm going to appear boastful or ego driven. And the
Right.
other side is I'm sharing because of the fact that I want people to connect with me. So, and I think that's something that I talk about on the podcast a lot, is that we have to share our stories and who we are. And being that differentiator is really about sharing who you are. And I love that you're able to help people rewrite some of their books, right? They have all the information, but you help them rewrite it.
Right. 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 Well, you're absolutely right. What it is to create a big, sexy idea, I'll go in and I'll work with a company or an individual who they may have some success, but they're not truly as successful as they need to be, or that they could be. And what it is, in order to come up with their big, sexy idea, it usually is something that it's not something brand new. See, that's the thing. It's not like I come in and I create something entirely new. It's probably something, because if I created something brand new that was out of their solar system and I brought it into their solar system, they would probably reject it. Even if they thought it sounded good, it's not something that they could back up because it wouldn't be part of who they are. So it's more about sifting who they are or who their brand is right now, and unearthing something that they just haven't given sufficient attention to. So, for instance, one of my clients who I adore, Chris Edmunds. Chris had been the head of culture work for Ken Blanchard company. He had done like a lot of culture work at the Ken Blanchard companies, and so he and Mark Babbitt, they got together and they had written a book proposal that they weren't getting the excitement about it that they wanted. And so I read over the book proposal. Now, the book proposal was like 50 pages long. And I read over the book proposal and I said, there's a concept like on page 4 or page 5 that's extraordinary, but it's not what the proposal's about. Right? It is to a degree, but it's not really what the proposal's about. In the middle of a paragraph in a sentence or so, they had written the sentence. I don't remember the rest of the sentence, but the end of the sentence or the middle of the sentence, they had used the term like good comes first. They were talking about in organizations you need to have good come first so that employees feel seen. And it was something like that or whatnot. And I circled that and I said, that's your book. That's your brand. That's what everything needs to be about. And so now this came out a few months ago. It's brilliant. These guys are brilliant. They're amazing. You can see, like Venus Williams wrote the foreword and whatnot, but it was the idea of like, this came from them. Like it was already in their work, but it was like a satellite. It was like a moon around a planet. It was not the main thing. It was an ancillary thing. So I would argue with everyone listening that there's some asteroid that's circling who they are, that they just look at it as a piece of debris, maybe. And if that was brought to the fore, that would change everything for them.
I often say with my clients that I go on a treasure hunt with them, right? They have the treasure, it's buried in there, and we're just dusting off the treasures and the gems that are inside of them. And I just picture that in the work that you do, just as you're talking, and that's exactly what because they're giving it to you. You're just saying, wait a minute, that's shinier than the other piece.
Oh, yeah. I used to have an assistant named Brendan, and Brendan, I worked with him years ago when he was in his 20s. And he said to me, he watched me work, and he said, you don't create anything brand new for people. And I said, no, I don't. And he said, you just sift through all their stuff. And I said, that's right. So he used to call me the sifter. He'd go, sifter, because he's in his 20s or so. So he'd call me the sifter. And it's like, right. Well, but again, I'm very capable of creating new ideas. I create new ideas all the time for my own stuff. For your stuff, if I created something brand new, again, it would be, what? That's not what I'm about. Why are you telling me that? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but that makes it special because that means you're listening, and not everybody listens. A lot of people talk and create for someone else. So somebody who could be a good listener to find those treasures or sift through all of the other things, as you put it, that's a true specialty.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you. So a kind of a two-part question for you. What does seeing someone succeed and go from coming to you with, like you just mentioned, I believe his name was Bill Treasurer, going from that, him, saying, I'm going into organizations with my head down, to being now a 7-figure earner. And what does magic give you, and how are they similar, or maybe they're not?
Oh, yeah. So to me, those are two very different questions. So I'll answer the one that I think I have a more interesting answer for. So, because I'm like a differentiator, entertainer type of guy. So I'll pick the one that's the more. So being a magician is very important to me, because magicians, tricks can't be subtle. If the end result of a trick is too subtle, it won't be a good magic trick. An example that I like to use is if I said, Jody, can I borrow a quarter from you? And here's a black Sharpie marker, write your initials on the quarter. What's the date on the quarter? And you say 2017. And I say, great, let me take the quarter, put it in my hand, snap my fingers. And now what's the date on your signed quarter? And you say 2018. That would be a horrible trick, because you would say, oh, 2017 to 2018, maybe the light was bad, my glasses, maybe there was a reflection. Like you might say, oh, cute, but that would be about the end of it. A better trick would be for me to say, can you take out a quarter, sign your name to it, give me the quarter, put it in my hand, snap my fingers, and now your signed quarter turns into a live box turtle with your signature on the shell. And then I give it to you and I hand it. That's a great trick. That's like a freak out trick. Absolutely. And so, because that's a big transformation, that's a whole different effect. And so to me, magicians, I always say, we go for the freak out. And so when I'm working with clients too, I try, the difference is usually not subtle. Like what it is that I'm going for a freak out. Like we can't always get there, but most of the time we do. It's something where the change is to such an extent that people jump up and down and they can't stop talking about it. I don't mean the client, I mean their marketplace. It's like where people go, oh man, tell me more about that. And you don't usually do that through a subtle change. It's usually a very dramatic change. Anyway, so you talked about how does my magic background influence the work I do? It's because magicians go for big, big, big changes, like big freak out stuff. They look to the reaction of what people in the audience are going to experience. They try to create a big reaction. So I do that in the positioning and differentiation work I do, which I find is very unusual too. I find if there are other people doing the kind of work I do, they're more like, oh, okay. Like the change is like, okay, I guess that's a change. It's more 2017 to 2018 changes is what I see from in other places. But yeah, seeing how people, your first question, about seeing people's lives change. I mean, there's nothing more gratifying than, because their life changes, their direction changes. It's like their direction changes. They know exactly what they're about. It allows them to more easily pick who their marketplace is, their clients, their services, who they're dealing with, what it is they should come out, how they should answer questions or so. Like it goes beyond just a monetary change. It affects every single thing they do, so it's so gratifying to see that you have that kind of change in someone's life or in an organization, the life of an organization.
I think, yeah. So I can only imagine how, I can only imagine seeing it, because you're doing it on such a big scale. And I love how you mentioned about the freak out piece of it. I think that perfectly goes. So I could talk to you for hours, but I have two more quick questions for you. I know we have to go at the top of the hour, but I wanted to ask you, you never finished on what happened with after you had that conversation with that person and they were trying to calm you down to not be so nervous when you went out on stage. What happened?
I killed. As a matter of fact, right at Caroline's Comedy Club. This was 15 years ago or however. When I got off stage after, two different women came up to me in the audience, like when everyone was finished. They didn't do it rudely. It's like when the show was over. They came up to me independent of one another, and they each said, like, "I loved your set." And I remember thinking, I have a set.
Oh, that's so sad.
They used the vernacular, which meant a lot to me. Oh, it was really, really great. And another important thing I learned from that is there was a joke that I thought was weak in my 5-minute set. And, because in a 5-minute set, you have a lot of jokes. I mean, it sounds like, 5 minutes. It's like, no, you're saying like, 20 different jokes. So there was a joke that I thought was weaker than the others. And when I was there at the club, I said, I'm going to cut this joke out. But then I decided before I went up, I wasn't going to cut it out because I thought I rehearsed it with it in. So I didn't want to cut it out and suddenly in the middle of everyone say, oh my God, what's the next thing? Because I pulled out the thing that would link to it. So I said, okay, I'm just going to motor through that bad joke to get on to the next one. Anyway, I was up there and I was doing great. And I came to the joke I was going to pull out. And I told people the joke and it got the biggest reaction of the whole thing. But that's not actually the point why I'm saying this. It got the biggest reaction of the whole night. And I remember that as people were laughing on stage, I thought to myself, if they like that joke, wait until they hear what I have to say next, because I knew a better joke was coming. And so afterwards, when I thought about what I had done up there and I remembered what I had said to myself, I said, I always want to be in that position. And so I always want my clients to be in that position with their brand, with books they write, speeches they give, what products they really, whatever it is. I always want them to be in the position of, if they like this, wait till they see what comes next. So like when I coach people to write books, let's say, often books have very strong beginnings, business books, the first 15, 20 pages, and then they die, because the person's just trying to pad the book. They don't know what to say next. Like, not when I coach someone to write a book. Like, it's always, we're going to use your best material and we're going to see what book demands to be written from your best ideas, insights, and stories, because I want someone to freak out anywhere they open your book. Like, even if they open it 4/5 of the way through, I want them to go, oh man, look at this. You know what I mean? Like, there's no coasting in it. It's all going to be your best stuff. Whatever we do to need to make it your best stuff, that's what it's going to be. You know what I mean? So that comes from when I was standing on stage saying, if they like that, wait till they hear this, right? So that influenced the rest of my career.
It just takes one moment to influence the entire career. And it just takes one person to believe in you, the person who reached out, who actually answered you and didn't know who you were, that changed your career.
It's
incredible how just one move can change everything. So
That's
for
right.
those people listening who may feel stuck, that moment may not be coming yet. It isn't here yet, but it doesn't mean it's not coming, and it might be within the next 5 minutes. So it's incredible how that happens. Last question, Mark,
Yeah.
that I'm asking everybody this year, and what it is what is the footprint that you want to leave behind? We all take up space while we're here. What do you want people to remember?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind, I don't know, if you asked me that tomorrow, I might answer differently, but I try to appreciate things, big and small, animate and inanimate. So like, in other words, I walk around when I visit a place, let's say I try to find out its history. I try to understand like why the bricks are made out of what the bricks are made out of. I try to understand why the trees are leaning in the way that they lean. I try to understand why those leaves fall on that tree, but those leaves don't fall on that other tree, and things like that. So I very actively try to understand people right closely, like people and objects. Like, why is that one scarred in its spot like that, like armoire? Like, why is that the only spot it's scarred in, where the rest it's like what was? So I just walk around in that kind of state where I'm constantly looking and searching. And so to me, this idea of appreciating what's out there, both human and not, is something that's a footprint I would love to leave, to have people like appreciate things in a closer way than maybe they sometimes do.
Oh, such a great answer, Mark, because people, I say this all the time, they live on cruise control. They don't pay attention to the detail.
Right. Beautifully put.
No, thank you. Beautifully put on your side too. So how do people find you? Because I mean, obviously I know people who are listening are going to say, how do I find him?
Oh, yeah. If you go to my website, levyinnovation.com, that's LEVY innovation.com, levyinnovation.com. You can just email me there and I'll get in touch with you. And I'd love to have a chat. So yeah. But thank you for asking.
What are the names of the books, so people know also that you?
I wrote, well, my favorite book that I wrote a book on how to use writing to generate new thoughts, how to create ideas you don't have beforehand through the process of writing. And so that book's called Accidental Genius: Using Writing to Generate Your Best Ideas, Insight, and Content. So that's a cool book.
Yeah. That is a cool book, and I'm excited to read it myself. So thank you, and it'll go on my bookshelf right behind me, where all my change maker books go that I read. But thank you, Mark. Thank you for the insight. I hope you'll come back again. Oh,
I would love to. And let me just say, Jody, you're a fantastic interviewer. Like, I get interviewed a lot. You are top notch. So I hope everyone appreciates how, like, super cool. So thank you for that. I'm honored of someone of your smarts interviewing me. So thank you.
I'm honored that you said that. So thank you. I'm so glad we connected. And I want to thank Jason Goldberg for that, because I follow Jason and you were on with Jason on something. And so thank you to that, because you just never know who you'll connect with by watching someone else. So it's
exactly.
I love this vehicle for that. Well, Mark, Levy, thank you for your insight, your input, your intellect. I so appreciate it. We'll see you again soon. And I'm going to say what I say at the end of every podcast. Today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what small or large step are you going to take today to get yourself closer to your goal? Thank you so much again to Mark Levy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. You never know who needs to hear the messages from my creative and amazing changemaker guests. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, Mark.